Hello everybody, this is Jason Peebles, the President of World Outreach, and this is another victory video that we produce to strengthen your walk in Christ. In a moment, I want to look at one of my favorite subjects in all the Bible, and that's grace, God's ability and enabling power. Before we do that though, let me just say a great big thank you to those of you who support one of our missionary families. You know, we're the home office for hundreds of missionaries all over the world, and every one of them depend on the prayer cover, the support, the sponsorship of friends just like you. So if you're a supporter of one of our missionaries, thank you very much. Also, hey, if you're a missionary watching this and you're in need of a dependable home office, then you've found the right place. Simply go to our website, click on the missionary agency section, and all the details are there on what we provide for our missionaries, how we help them, how we process all their support, send receipts out for them, deposit their funds. We do a whole variety of services every month that actually helps them stay on the mission field. So if you're a missionary in need, then please contact us. All right, let's turn our attention now for a few minutes to this subject of grace, God's ability and enabling power. You know, once you become a Christian, you begin to realize, I don't think I can live this life. I mean, in your own power, you can't have the fruit of the Spirit. In your own power, you can't love the unlovable. In your own power, you can't do what God's called you to do. So suddenly, there's kind of a frustration factor that sets in. In fact, the Apostle Paul wrote about that in Romans chapter 7, where he said, "Oh, wretched man that I am, who can help me?" Finally, you realize, thank God, hopefully you finally realize that it's not about what I can do. It's about my faith, my trust, my dependency in what God can do. There's the big difference. You begin to realize that it's not I, but it's Christ who lives in me. So the secret formula, if I could say that, the secret ingredient is grace. That is learning to trust in what God has done, what He can do, and letting Him live His life through you. Now, there are a lot of definitions for the subject of grace. For instance, one of the very first ones I ever heard was grace is God's unmerited favor. And that's a good definition. I like that. We don't merit it. We didn't deserve it. Yet Jesus went to the cross for us and rose from the dead for us. So we received a gift that we didn't deserve. But one of the definitions that I'm really partial to and I like a lot about grace is this. Grace is God's ability and His enabling power. God's ability and His enabling power. So my focus shifted from trying to work hard for God, trying to do what God's told me to do, me, my power, and you get frustrated. The focus shift from that to I need to have faith in what God has done and can do through me. Let me share this verse with you. Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 and 9. Probably the most well-known passage on the subject of grace. It says, "For by grace you have been saved through faith." Now I'm going to kind of play with this a little bit and bear with me because I may say something that you don't agree with initially, but if you think about it, you'll agree with it. You're not saved by faith. Faith in what? People have faith in themselves. They have faith in their business. They have faith in this or that. We have to have faith in the right object. It says, "For by grace you have been saved." So the truth is, our faith doesn't save us. It's the grace of God. It's what He did. Yet we do have to have faith in what He provided. So it's really grace and faith working together. It says, "For by grace you have been saved through faith, that not of yourselves, it's the gift of God." Now, we tend to understand that in the realm of salvation. We understand that Jesus went to the cross, unmerited favor. We got something that we didn't deserve. It's called a gift. It is the gift of God. And we have faith in that. But you know what? Once you become a Christian, there's a whole other aspect to grace where we have to apply the same exact principles. For instance, watch this. You could read this, "For by grace you have been saved through faith." You could read it this way, "For by grace you will walk in the fruit of the Spirit through faith. For by grace you will fulfill your ministry through faith. Now let's plug our definition in there. What is grace? Grace is God's ability and enabling power. So we could read it this way: for by God's ability and enabling power, you will fulfill your ministry. For by grace, God's ability and enabling power, you will walk in love towards your spouse and your children. You know, on those days when it seems like, oh my gosh, I'm not sure I can do this, what you need to do on the inside is kind of throw your hands up and go, I can't do this, but I choose to put my faith and dependency in God's ability and His enabling power, and He can do it through me. And so you can apply this same principles through every part of your Christian life. For by grace, you'll have the fruit of the Spirit. For by grace, you'll walk in the gifts of the Spirit. For by grace, you'll have a successful business. You could even read it this way: for by grace, God's ability and enabling power, you'll purchase your first home through faith. And you begin to depend on what God can do through His ability, and not what you can work so hard and try to please God and try to do it for God. No, that only leads down to the frustration path. He goes on and he finishes here: for by grace you have been saved through faith, that not of yourselves, it's the gift of God, not of works. There it is, not of works, lest any man should boast. So the Christian life is not about you working hard to please God or working hard for God. It's about you depending on God's ability and enabling power. And by the way, before I forget it, let me just mention that we have an awesome study guide that you can print from our website on the subject of grace. In fact, the title is Shout Grace, because you'll learn to speak grace and get excited about grace once you get the revelation. But if you'll go to our website and go to the free Bible study section, and then there's a subsection within that section called Free Study Guides, print this out. And it's an awesome study that goes even deeper than what we can do on this video. And additionally, in those free Bible studies, there are audio sessions, audio teachings, and these are free. There's over 6 hours of teaching on this subject of grace. So let me encourage you to go there. They used to be on cassette tapes. Now they've been turned into MP3s. So you can download these to your device, or you can listen through your device or your computer, and it's absolutely free. All of our study tools are free, and they'll be a blessing to you. So go further in this subject of grace. Now, one other passage that I'd like to share with you before we conclude, and this is a little known passage. I like this verse, but most people probably have never really read it or taken account of it. It's in 1 Corinthians 15, verse 10. And in this verse, the Apostle Paul gives us kind of an insight to his motivation. What drove him? What motivated him? I mean, good gracious, when you think about this guy who went through shipwrecks, stonings, beatings, mob riots, how in the world did the guy do that? Well, he gives us the answer here. He says in verse 10, I'm in 1 Corinthians 15, verse 10. He says, for by the grace of God I am what I am. And he's referring to his apostleship. He's saying, I'm an apostle by God's ability and His enabling power. He says, but by the grace of God I am what I am, and His grace toward me was not in vain. Well, I'd like to just camp out there for a minute, but we don't really have the time. But did you know that the grace of God can be in vain? In other words, God has all the resources, all the abilities. He's wanting to labor through you, work through you. But if you don't have faith in it, and you don't learn to depend upon His grace, then it doesn't avail anything. Paul goes on to say, but I labored more abundantly than they all. Who's the they all? He's saying, you can take all the other apostles and lump them together. I labored more abundantly than they all, yet not I. Now here's the key. Yet not I, but the grace of God which was with me. Do you see that? I want you to catch this. Paul's saying, you know, during those shipwrecks, during those storms, during the times I was strapped to the pole and I was being beat or stoned, it wasn't I, because I would have quit a long time ago. I'm paraphrasing here. Paul's saying it wasn't I, but it was God's ability and His enabling power that I had learned to put my faith in. And there's the key. There's the key that I hope you'll see, is that grace is not just salvation grace. Thank God for that. But there is also an enabling grace that we need to learn to tap into, where God's ability can work through us, whether it's in apostleship, missionary work, whether it's in planting or starting your own business, being successful in that, buying a home, raising your children, you need to learn to tap into God's enabling power. So there's different aspects to this subject of grace. There's saving grace, there's enabling grace, there's equipping grace. I'm a full believer that if God calls you to do something, He's going to equip you and give you a grace that maybe others don't have, but you have it. You have what it takes to do that assignment. There's also grace that multiplies. Did you know that we can grow in grace and it can actually multiply in our life? So it's almost like an energy or a motivation that's beyond normal, beyond the natural. You know, I like to listen to motivational speakers and get pumped up at times and go out the door, feeling enthused. But did you know that grace is a supernatural motivation? It's a supernatural energy that you can tap into to do what God's called you to do. So I trust that this has been a blessing to you. And as I said, get the study guide. It's free. Print it from our website. Also get the audio sessions. There's 6 hours of study on this stuff. It'll absolutely revolutionize your life when you finally realize that, hey, it's not about how hard I can work for God. It's about me learning to depend and trust in His ability and His enabling power. Well, this is Jason Peebles reminding you, starve your doubts, feed your faith, and follow God's plan for your life.